I'm Tash T. I am an EDI consultant, so equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant. That is my general day job. I'm also founder of Breaking the Distance alongside my beautiful wife, which is a platform that promotes LGBTQ visibility and everything amazing about who we are as a community. Um, and then I'm also a performer. So after this, I'm hopping off down to Devon to be in a Little Mix tribute, singing Shout Out to My Ex for the weekend at a festival. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me and the many hats I wear. Just a little bit of a visual for you. I am sitting in front of a bluish background, wearing a black jumper. I am a woman of colour, so I'm mixed race. And I have my hair in braids with a cute little scrunchie, orange scrunchie that you can see peeping out the top.
Do you know, I love working with Tash so much. And I got to meet your wife the other day on Zoom. It was amazing. And you were off to be a Spice Girl that day. So,
Yes, I was.
I'm already filled with envy. My name's Paul. I'm really delighted to be here today and to work with Tash, who is just such a joy. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a creative change consultant, very recently self-employed and negotiating my way through that, which is an interesting journey. Visually, I am a cisgender, male presenting white man with a bit of a scruffy beard that's going to be trimmed on Sunday, so it's looking a bit messy at the moment. My face decided to grow a massive spot on the end of my nose this morning, so if you picture Rudolph with a beard, you won't be far off. And I'm sitting in front of a colour-coded bookshelf, which everyone knows is the only way it should be. But it's lovely to be here with you today.
Thank you. So, for those of you who obviously you can see by the title, Finding Your No, and actually it's a perfect segue just from the end of the session, the previous session, if you were listening
Mm.
in around, how do we really find those boundaries? And a lot of sort of what Rico and Ava and everyone was saying in that previous session was around, finding the confidence to say no. And how do we sort of take care of ourselves? So the objectives we're going to look at through today's session is going to be about exploring the opportunities and costs of visibility as queer leaders, as well as looking at why it can be so hard to say no. What are the challenges, and how can we build that muscle to enable us to have the confidence and the strength to be able to do it? And what's the place of compassion in our future stories? So that's not just self-compassion, but also our collective compassion. So that's what we're going to be looking into. I'm going to hand over to Paul for the next little moment.
I know, so I'm feeling the pressure of Mela saying, no, it's a fun session, isn't it? It's like, yeah, kind of. Um, this session is actually really full, and so we feel like we're giving you we're touching on a number of things that we could do a much deeper dive into, and maybe that's something we could do for the future. But we've structured some time for questions at the end. So if something does come up for you throughout the session, just make a note of it and we can come back to it. And we just wanted to start with a bit of an experience. So just, if you can, just make yourself a bit comfy in your chair. If you can, try and do even less than you were just doing. See if you can do less in this moment. And maybe just see if you can locate your feet on the floor. Like, not just the idea of your feet, but really see if you can find your feet and just get a sense of the support that's available to you from whatever it is that you're sitting on. Because we'd like you to be in a place of curiosity, a place of self-inquiry. And in a second, Tash is going to show a slide that has something on it. And we would just like you to be in a place of noticing what happens to your body. And just be curious. It might be nothing. It might be blank. It might be something different. But just be curious. So whenever you're ready, Tash.
I see lots of smiles instantly there.
I know, I sat back. I knew this was coming. And yet I still sat back. It made me
Yeah,
sit back in my chair. What happened to you, Tash?
I felt this sudden like brace, of like, oh, tension, but not in like a negative, but just like I'm bracing for attack, almost fight or flight mode, I guess. And I was definitely going into fight mode then.
And we knew this was coming. Um,
we,
what about for others? Feel free just to unmute yourself and just jump in. Like, what did you notice happen for you?
you
I
can also
noticed
share in the
that
chat as well. I go for it.
I noticed that if the no completely fills the space of the screen of the slides, you know? It's like,
Mm. And was there any impact for you, Andrew?
well, I just like the idea that, even if some of us do say no, we sort of go, no, or I might think of it, I'll get back to you. They're all kind of our ways of saying no, but it's not no which completely fills the space,
Yeah.
you know?
So I love that you get a little head motion when you do that. You go, no. It's
Yeah.
kind of like this, like, yes, no. How about for others? Thank you, Andrew. What was your noticing of yourself when that popped up on screen?
Got a couple into the comments of I
Oh, cool.
smiled and braced. The slide was screaming at me. It's difficult to say. It's also on backwards.
Oh,
Uncomfortable, loud,
mm,
slight freeze and panic was also felt in the comments.
mm,
I think as an autonomous adult, it's a word that I struggle with, but as a parent, it's a word that I consistently hear, and that actually when I see that on the screen, it just reminds me of my children. My
Right.
children are very good at saying no, always, and it's now making me wonder at what point in life do we lose that? Because my children always say it with an exclamation mark as well, very confidently. So yeah, where at what point do we become uncomfortable with that no word?
Yeah. That's such a beautiful noticing, Jack, because at some point for me, I know that no becomes smaller and it loses the exclamation mark and maybe it turns into a yes. Even though it's still saying no in my brain, my mouth says yes. And so I think that's really lovely about, I wonder when that happens or why
It's
that
like it's like a yes.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, so we just wanted to begin with that because we all have a relationship to know. We all have a relationship to it when we hear it from a partner, a friend, from an authority figure, or if we say it, or if we don't say it. We all have some kind of relationship to it, and that relationship is really dynamic. And part of what we wanted to explore in this session is not just no, but looking at how no in the context of boundaries and self-compassion and visibility and leadership, how that can really affect how we show up. And Tash, I love working with you. I love seeing you. You show up in such a brilliant way. And I was just wondering about, in terms of being in a space like this together with all of these brilliant people, it means being seen, like being really, truly seen. And, for all of us, being a leader in whatever form that takes, it means we're seen. And yet, as queer people, we might have sometimes sought refuge in invisibility. I know that when I was young, I did everything I could not to be seen. When I see like school photos of myself, I'm hiding at the back, and often I wouldn't speak up if there was some injustice going on or if there was a bit of bullying going on because I didn't want to draw attention to myself. So I have this bit of a weird relationship with visibility because on one hand, that's how we get things done. And I know that you've kind of navigated that tension, Tash. So maybe you could just start with, how did you first encounter that? And then I can drop in a few questions along the way.
Yeah, so I kind of come from an opposite sort of perspective. As I said, I'm a performer first and foremost. So it's the very opposite, right? It's all about being seen, and not just being seen, but being the center of the stage in the spotlight is kind of where I guess I'm most comfortable. But actually, upon reflection, that's only as a version of what an audience expects, right? It's playing a character. It's not necessarily seen as me in my 100% authentic self all the time. And the first sort of time that I really experienced probably like consciously the element of being seen, not on my terms, I would say, was actually, it's funny because Rico, sorry, no, it wasn't Rico, it was somebody else, was in the previous session, was referring to Black Lives Matter and around 2020, in June of 2020. And obviously there was this sort of global tension that was happening. And for me, myself personally, I grew up in Plymouth, Devon, so a predominantly white area of the country. And I never really thought of myself in context of racial identity at that time growing up, and probably not for a good sort of 20, 30 years of my life. And at that time, I was seeing sort of a conflict on multiple parts of my identity, from the fact that my mum is Black, my dad is white. So this kind of, I'm now being seen, and I was very acutely aware at that point that the world is definitely seeing me as a Black woman versus a mixed race person. And then also by that point, the platform that I had created with my wife, Breaking the Distance, was of a level that it was very visible. And a lot of the sort of the pushback and the conflict that was happening there was coming from predominantly the Black community. So there's another part of my identity that is also being seen, but is also not being accepted. And all amongst that, out of the back of that, I started doing, a lot of work in diversity and inclusion. And then I suddenly felt this need to be seen in all spaces. I'm somebody, I feel confident in sharing my story, and the challenges of it. And there's a conversation that's happening around, the lives of Black and brown people. And I'm being asked my opinion. I'm being thrown into the spotlight. And I feel like I need to be there because I don't know how long this opportunity is going to last. And I know for many of us, we feel it, especially around Pride Month, when all of a sudden the attention turns. Sometimes it's, if a company and organization is really, really good and on it, they'll have asked you around April. And if they're not too good, they'll ask you around the 1st of June.
Yes.
If you're available, depending on how on it they are and how good the team is. And so I felt this sense of needing to be in these spaces. I have to be there because I don't know if someone's going to ask me again. And I feel like I need to represent all of these different communities, and be this shining light, and also, to encourage people to have allyship and to show that this is the story. And there's a sense of overwhelm to that.
I feel exhausted hearing it because you deliver it with such energy, and you are, you really do radiate that. And yet, as you were saying it, I was just feeling this pressure, like this kind of sense, it's like sitting back from the screen again, like that. What does that, how does that overwhelm show up versus I've got this image of you being center stage when you're performing, and then you said, and then I get thrown into the spotlight. So what's the overwhelm in the two of those?
It shows up in a way of, I guess, I think for many people maybe align with this, where when we're sort of on a path and we're doing things and we're kind of back to back and we're just going. And in the moment, in the conversation, I'm here, I'm present. But then what did it look like immediately after? And it'd be immediately after, the Zoom would close and I'd look at my wife, she'd go, how did it go? I don't know why, I just feel really emotional. And I'd burst into tears. And it would happen all the time. And it didn't kind of really matter what space it was in. It didn't necessarily have to be a particularly triggering session necessarily. It could have just been, a general session on ED&I, but obviously I'm bringing my lived experience to it. And every time I would sort of step away and have this, can we put on like Drag Race or something? I need something to just make me happy and smile. I don't know. So I definitely felt that sort of you put yourself in that emotional space each time.
And also, and maybe this is the case or maybe not, but sometimes doing things virtually, like if you're doing something in person, you come off the stage and someone gives you a hug, or people are clapping, or you get a bit of validation from it.
Yeah.
And then a virtual thing, you kind of click off and then you're like, how was that? So what, how do you, in terms of your boundaries, like where do you get that validation from if you're not in front of a crowd, or how do you get that kind of strength to do it?
I think it's absolutely having community, and that can be I have friends that I will immediately call. If I don't have anyone immediately around me, I have people that I will call and speak to. But also even, you know, this is why I love We Create Spaces, because I know that it's a shared held space. Even though I may be facilitating, I may be here as a participant, I know that I don't have to perform or hold myself to a certain level in order to communicate here. And so sometimes maybe I'm not in that space delivering, but I will find that space outside of it. I'll go to an event, or I'll attend something and be a participant where I'm sitting back and watching and just feeling, I guess, the therapy from that a lot of the time.
And what about in terms of boundaries? Like, I know that Rico said earlier that he's really comfortable with, you know, saying no, with holding that space. And what are your boundaries like? Like, are any of them a little bit leaky sometimes, or, you know, where
leaky
are they?
Boundaries? Yeah, I've got better at it, and I'm the type of person I have to really push myself to a point where, you know, to the extreme, and then I'm, oh, okay, yeah, this is not sustainable. And that was probably the latter end of last year for me. And I started this year saying, actually, I'm going to be more reflective. So, you know, yes, I appreciate that right now we're kind of stepping into that amping up area. It's May into June. It gets a lot heavier. I know that, but I also know I have a holiday. That holiday is going to be, you know, a complete 2-week shut off. And it's funny, actually, Michael messaged me the other week and was like, hey, there's something, if you want to get involved in this event, it's happening. It's slap bang in the middle of the holiday. And I sort of looked at my wife and I was like, oh, you know, it wouldn't be, you know, it's going to be a We Create Space. And she was like, babe, what did you say? The holiday is the holiday. And I was like, you're right. She's like, there will be more events. There will be more opportunities. Michael will understand. Okay, yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Hi, Michael, just to let you know, I'm actually on holiday then. I'm so sorry. Like, and obviously I know that Michael on the other end is going, of course, I will ask somebody else. It's not a big deal. But it was the first like real test of properly saying no. But it also still came with an excuse, right? And it's not an excuse, it's a very valid thing, but you know, you feel the need to justify it, I guess. It can't just be a simple no.
Yeah, almost like, you know, my head is hanging off, but I'll still almost say yes. Yeah, as you were saying that, I was kind of feeling a bit of like my heart racing, because I'm also going on holiday next week. And the day after we land, I'm doing a presentation to a conference because I couldn't say no. And I'm like, what am I doing?
I had a session booked on my honeymoon, and it was only because I got COVID that I was actually still at home doing that session. But if it all had gone to plan, I mean, I did it whilst I had COVID, let's just say that. But if all had gone to plan, I would have been in Mexico being like, welcome everyone. So yeah, that's the extent of pushing it that can be and having no boundaries.
A COVID test with a drawn-on line is our best friend. When you think about your future self, because you've built on so many things to get yourself here, and you haven't come this far just to come this far. So if you make a wish for your future self in relation to being more compassionate to yourself, what would it be?
I think it would be about really finding the balance. And I mean, I also understand that I have a certain amount of privilege to be in this situation now, whereby I can get offered a ton of things. And actually now I'm in a position where I can sit back and say, what are the things out of those offers that really bring me joy and that I really want to do, versus feeling like, you know, I've come from a place where it's definitely been, you know, I'm a performer, creative by nature. You have to hustle. Everything is a yes. Yes, yes. You want me to, I've taught football to 9 to 11-year-old Jewish girls in a primary school. Like, I'm not qualified for any of those things, but at some point, yes, I'll do it. I'll be there. I'll figure it out. And actually understanding that I'm now in a place where I don't have to say yes to everything from a loss situation. There is abundance, and to trust that is the case. So that's kind of probably the biggest thing for me is, and there's other people who maybe want the opportunity. Give other people the opportunity to say yes. That's what comes out of your no, is somebody else gets the opportunity to say yes.
Yeah, that's a lovely way to frame it, actually. Saying no is an act of generosity. That would make it feel easier for me.
You're welcome. No, you're welcome.
Ask me again. No. I'm just, so you're getting some lovely Feedback about abundance, absolutely. I'm just wondering if anyone else wanted to, sometimes just like saying it out loud or writing it can, yeah, put something out into the universe or make it come to life. Just what would your wish be for yourself around self-compassion? I think I'm going to take something away there about seeing no as a generous act. But yeah, if anyone else wants to just chip in, what wish would you make for yourself? Either just unmute yourself and jump in or type it into the chat. This is the audience participation section.
They're all like, no, you're welcome.
Yeah. The concept of yes behind the no. Thank you, Hervoye. Well, they're not coming flooding in, so let's keep moving and then we'll see, because you're going to get the chance to practice in a little bit. But thank you, Tash. In terms of your own story, what has helped you build that trust in yourself?
I think sometimes it has been the doing. I think that's the thing, is you sometimes, with so many things, we can build up a perception of what things are going to look like in our mind. And sometimes our minds can be our own worst enemy, right? It's where we fail most, is in our mind. And it's where the worst things happen quite often in our mind. We perceive things in the worst state. So actually, sometimes it has been doing things. And in this situation, saying the no, and then realizing the world didn't end. And you know, they still came back to you for something else, or so actually it can be in the doing that I think is where you can really learn.
I love that. Thank you. So we're going to come back to you in a bit, and you're going to use some different skills with us.
Yes,
another part of that. I'm loving the ones coming in. Yeah, just thinking that, practicing my no. So that's interesting. There's us kind of going, yeah, say no, but then when I hear a no, I go, oh, but that shouldn't apply to me. That's it's okay for me to say it, maybe not to hear it. So there is something really interesting in that. I love that, Maria, recognizing that I and selfish is not always a bad thing. Kid's eye, stopping to celebrate my wins and clapping hands for myself, and acknowledging that I can't do it. Yes, lovely. Not feeling compelled to constantly say that, oh, these are great. Thank you. We'll come back to those a bit later. We just wanted to have a bit of time kind of to bring in a bit of help from other people, I guess. And, you know, one of the things I've tried to learn, and, you know, sometimes more effectively than others, is that we don't have to do all of this work ourselves. Like when you think about even just the words self-care, self-compassion, you know, the burden, the responsibility kind of sits with us, self, which for me, it sometimes means that if I'm struggling with something, I might maybe withdraw or go inside myself and wrestle with myself, which is a bit of a weird, bit of a hot image. But, you know, that actually we don't have to do the work on our own. Others have done some of that work for us already. So I just wanted to share a bit of thinking from some others that we can use for ourselves if we have this this internal struggle. And, you know, all of this is kind of offered a bit like a holiday buffet breakfast. I'm already on holiday. I'm imagining what it's like. You take what you like, you leave what you don't. You know, you might already be up to here with things to think about. So there's no expectation here to take anything away or do anything with it. But if something resonates with you, if something lands with you, make a note of it. Think about how you might use that. And I mean, we hadn't planned it like this, but as if by magic, I think the things I wanted to talk about have come up many times today already. They've come up in different ways. And firstly, boundaries. And, you know, that's something, Rico, I'm going to be in touch. I need a bit of boundary coaching. It's something I've really been experiencing in the last couple of weeks as I've moved from being employed to self-employed. I'm trampling over my own boundaries all over the place. And so I was really thinking about, are there ways that I can lean into boundaries differently? And it kind of helped me by thinking about what a boundary is. Like, a boundary means that there's a definition around something. There's a limit. There's a border or an edge. And also boundaries are dynamic. You know, they're often changeable. They're sometimes irrational. They're complex. You know, it's no wonder we sometimes struggle with them. And so I remind myself that actually my body contains boundaries and it already knows exactly how to use them. So every single cell in our bodies has a boundary. And the way our cells work is that they use that boundaries to absorb nourishment, let stuff in, and to keep out toxins. And our cells don't overthink stuff. They just know what to do. So on a cellular level, we know how to hold a boundary. So when I'm struggling with a boundary, what I try and do is I ask myself, what would a healthy cell do? It's not quite as catchy as what would Beyonce do, but just by asking myself that question, I can think about how am I holding these boundaries? And that could be in terms of emotional boundaries, physical, sexual, spiritual, or, the one that I'm kind of up against at the moment, which is a time boundary. So I think, what would I do if I was a healthy cell? How would I let in the nourishment? How would I keep out the toxin? And the research on boundaries, it shows that they can be really strong. A boundary can be completely immovable, can be completely impenetrable, or it can be wide open, or it can be a bit of both. It can be a bit leaky. So, sometimes I think, well, where do I need to be with this? Do I really need to hold the line? Can it be completely open? Or do I need to be a bit more compassionate? So boundaries, again, lots of stuff that we could talk about there. But in terms of compassion, this is the second thing I wanted to talk about in terms of self-compassion. And this comes from the work of Kristen Neff, who's produced loads of research on this, like really very accessible stuff. And a lot of it's online. And her research on self-compassion lenses to look through when it comes to self-compassion. And the first one is the balance between self-kindness versus self-judgment. And she just seems a warmth and understanding towards ourselves if we fail or if we feel a bit inadequate or if we suffer, rather than ignoring that pain or actually, beating ourselves up about it. It's about how do we bring kindness to that in the way that we would to a friend who was struggling. The second thing that she invites us to think about is this continuum between our common humanity versus our isolation. And she says that everyone has feelings of inadequacy. Everyone has feelings of suffering in some kind. It's part of a shared human experience. And yet often I know I do, can sometimes think, oh, this is just happening to me. I feel completely alone in this. And sometimes just kind of placing ourselves on that continuum of going, is this really just happening to me? Or is this a shared thing that someone else could help with? Connecting into that shared of common humanity can really help us to feel a bit less alone. And then the third thing that she offers is, I guess a word that we throw about a lot, which is the difference between mindfulness and over-identification. And she talks about us trying to take a balanced approach. So even when we have emotions that might feel negative, that we look at them with some mindfulness, like we just observe them. We just accept ourselves exactly as we are in our entirety without needing to change. Versus over-identifying and going, oh, this is everything and I can't change, I can't get out of this. Something about kind of observing it and being kind to ourselves. And then that takes me to my third theme, which is about imposter syndrome, which has come up a number of times today. I will put the link into the chat, actually. There's a research paper that was written, it was back in 1978 when imposter syndrome was kind of coined as a term. It was two feminist psychotherapists, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, and they were doing work with professional women. And what they noticed was that these really powerful, high-status women were just doubting themselves. They were just putting themselves through it, going, oh, I can't do this, I'm going to get found out. And what the research showed was that actually imposter syndrome came not from a lack of belief in yourself, but it was that society was making these women feel like they weren't intelligent. And so one way that they tried to combat it was by just saying, are you smart? Are you intelligent? And just knowing that they could answer yes really helped the people that were struggling. And so, imposter syndrome really complex, but actually it's kind of straightforward in some ways. Are you smart? Are you intelligent? Yeah, that's why we're here. Okay, let's go. So there's something about, if it's that easy, why do we still do it? And I wonder, like, where's the line between imposter syndrome and being self-deprecating? Like, humility. Today what I love about the space is people are so honest, they're so open, they're so authentic, genuine. And today we've heard, a number of times, like, oh, I'm not an expert in this. Oh, I'm just winging it. Oh, I worry that I'm not doing enough. Oh no, I could be doing more. And I often struggle with that. So I give my words over to Hannah Gadsby, who I just think is so smart in the way that she deals with this. She wrote a whole stand-up set about self-deprecation, and she talks a lot about it. She says that she consciously broke up with self-deprecating behaviour. So I just want to read a bit about what she said, and then we'll give you the chance to practice some stuff. So Hannah Gadsby said, "I've built a career out of self-deprecating humour, and I don't want to do that anymore. Because you understand what self-deprecation means when it comes from someone who already exists in the margins. It's not humility, it's humiliation. It would be good and it would be lovely if we lived in an equal world, but we don't. So when I do it, it's about me putting myself in my place in a society that's like, we don't really like fat queer women. So if we lived in a community where everyone was considered equal and had equal rights, then I think self-deprecation and humility would be perfect, but we don't. So it works in two ways in those moments. It hurts less, and you get to draw attention away from your flaws and onto one of your strengths, your ability to be funny. But all you're doing is degrading yourself in public as a form of denial and entertainment. You think you don't deserve to be in that place. You think you don't deserve to exist. A self-deprecating comment is a way of excluding ourselves. It's an internal dialogue of self-shaming and negative self-talk. The world I live in already reflects all those negative self-thoughts back at me all the time. We don't see a positive idea of me in the world, so it's hard for me just to make it up in my own head and expect that to work. If anything, all I'd like to encourage people to say is just, I'm okay. Anyone on the margins, the world is already piling on you, so you don't need to be hard on yourself. We are allowed to take up space. We are allowed to talk about our problems and our oppression. We are allowed to be proud of who we are and heal, in spite of a society that wants us to stay broken. We are allowed to speak honestly and make people uncomfortable. We've been forced to feel uncomfortable in our own skin, and in spaces that are supposed to be safe for our whole lives. We deserve the right to make those people understand the damage they inflict, to make them feel awkward, to make them sit with their guilt and stare trauma in the face. I've built a career out of self-deprecating humour, and I don't want to do it anymore. I put myself down in order to speak, in order to get permission, and I simply will not do that anymore, not to myself or to anyone who identifies with me. And if that means my career's over, then so be it." Now, I feel shaky just reading those words.
Yeah.
They are so powerful, and words have power. So my encouragement is, when you feel tempted to put yourself down, when you feel inclined to make yourself smaller, when the discomfort that you feel makes you want to tell a joke about yourself, just take a breath and just locate your heart and speak from there. Because your heart can only speak in love. And the more that we can speak of ourselves in loving ways, the more others can learn from us how we want to be spoken of. So a little bit of words from other people. I take no credit for any of those. They're all from other people, but we don't have to do this by ourselves.
No, and I think it's also, even just listening to that quote, it was a form of no. It was a no more. And actually it was internally, right? It was a no to herself to say, I'm no longer going to do this anymore. But it was a very hard no. And also acknowledging the consequence of that. But actually, I don't care, because this is a no for me. and to show myself love, which is, I think, just kind of connects in the same way. Speaking of no, we want to give you the opportunity to practice. So I did tell you about several of the hats I wear. One of the other hats I used to wear a lifetime ago was a personal trainer. And as a personal trainer, if you come to me and you say, I want to work on this muscle group, I want to look this way, I want to get fit and healthy, then a lot of what we'll do is we'll go to a gym and we will work on certain exercises to build muscle, to build strength. And so today we're going to look at building the muscle that is no, because it is, and it takes repetition in order for us to get comfortable with it, right? In any, you're learning a language, any skill that you want to take on, it takes repetition to be able to get comfortable with it. So I want you to think of this as building that no muscle. Right. And so we're going to put you into breakout rooms for this, where you'll have the opportunity to ask each other questions and just to say no. No ifs, no buts, no excuses provided. Don't have to. And what we really want you to do is to really observe how it feels, especially when you're saying it unapologetically. It's just a straight, very polite, very kind no. And it doesn't have to be with anything else to it. So we can do a little example for you. And we do also have some example questions. So we don't want you to get nervous. We don't want you to get into the breakout room and just spend 10 minutes trying to think of questions. So Michael, if you can flip over to show. So we'll do a little tester between Paul and I. Paul, are you ready to say no, or do you want me to be the one saying no?
Can I ask you a question first?
No. In the interest of this.
Yeah, okay. Tash, we've got this Pride event coming up. Can you speak at it?
No. I'm biting my tongue not to give you a reason or an excuse, but yeah, so you see the idea. So you're going to go into breakout rooms. Quite a few of you will be in there, but I want everyone to have the opportunity to ask a question and to say no. For the rest of you who are in that breakout room, observe what you see in the way the person responds, how they deliver that no. Is it confident? Is it a little bit is there an apology there? And have a little moment to maybe even share how that feels. You don't have long in the breakout rooms, so don't feel the need to necessarily be like, hi, my name is this and I work this and here's my job title and blah, 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 and here's my LinkedIn. Shall we now say no? Just jump straight into it.
Should we do introductions? No.
No.
And how long have people got? About 10 minutes?
Yeah, so 10 minutes. So there'll be a couple of you in each room, so you'll have sort of a good chance to go through. If you want to take a quick picture or a screenshot of the example questions, feel free. If you have an example question that you've been asked and you really struggled with saying no to it, or something that comes up quite often for you, tell the people in your group, get them to ask you that question. So you get to flex that muscle of saying no to that particular request, especially if it's something that comes to you a lot.
So we're seeing Dan's family for the weekend. I know they're going to say, do you want to come for Christmas? I need to practice that no.
Right? No. Do you want to come for Christmas? That's probably the number one that a lot of us get. No. Babe, is it all right if my mum and dad come and stay with us for a little while? No. All of the things.
And what I love about it is it's making me laugh, and I think that for me makes it easier. If we play with it, if we just see this as an experiment and just a place of curiosity, you don't have to get it right, you just have to have fun with it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tash. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being part of this session. Thank you, Maylis. Thank you, Michael.